Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the 80th Annual Maine Agricultural Trade Show. My name is Nancy McBrady. I'm the Director of the Bureau of Agriculture, Food, and Rural Resources. It's my pleasure today to be hosting this panel regarding innovation in the face of crisis, harnessing local demand due to COVID-19. Nearly a full year into the global pandemic, we are all very familiar with the havoc caused by the coronavirus, exposing the fragility of the nation's food system. Virtually overnight, entire markets disappeared as restaurant, wholesale, and institutional accounts evaporated. Maine farmers and producers of all sizes immediately had to make adjustments to this new and changing reality. Consumers also experienced a seismic shift in how they ate and purchased food. Despite these upheavals across the spectrum, the pandemic has also had the effect of crystallizing Mainers' attention and support for local agriculture to a remarkable degree. The importance of and awareness around locally produced food has never been so highly valued, in my opinion. This awareness has benefited farms, nurseries, producers, and others who pivoted, perhaps the unofficial word of 2020, who offered curbside pickups, online pre-orders, or enhanced on-farm stores. In addition, interest in farmers markets and CSAs and nurseries has soared. Today's panelists represent viewpoints from across the spectrum of Maine's food system, spanning grain processing to greenhouses, and from online farm sales to farmers markets. These individuals made necessary adjustments to their businesses to keep customers and employees safe and to stay open. Ideally, by sharing some of their learnings, they can assist others within Maine's agricultural community as we enter this new season. They will also discuss what they believe is needed to sustain the current demand for local products after COVID-19 is finally and successfully curtailed. What can be done to harness consumer demand so that they continue to buy locally produced foods and support local businesses? In sum, what will be the lasting impact of COVID-19 upon Maine agriculture and food businesses? Now to the panelists. Amber Lambke is founder and CEO of Maine Grains, which sources and mills specialty organic and heritage grains from the Northeast. Located in downtown Skowhegan in a repurposed jailhouse, Maine grains are carried by specialty food stores and used by bakeries, breweries, and chefs throughout the Northeast. The mill has been instrumental in grassroots economic and community development in the region. Amber is also the founding director of the nonprofit Maine Grain Alliance, whose flagship event, the Kneading Conference, attracts hundreds of attendees from around the world almost every year and has spawned countless similar conferences. A driving force behind Maine's sustainable food movement, Amber has worked with local business leaders and community members to successfully bring the cultivation and processing of grains back to the Northeast. Her efforts have generated a broader understanding and appreciation of the flavor, nutrition, economic, and environmental value of freshly milled organic grains. Scott Longfellow is the co-owner of Longfellow's greenhouses, located in Manchester. Scott and his wife Sandy have built upon the tradition started with Scott's parents in creating the largest greenhouse in the state, with a state-of-the-art 21 greenhouse facility. Longfellow's produces an impressive array of products, from 40,000 geraniums to 15,000 flowering hanging baskets to 75,000 perennials. And they stock over 800 varieties of perennials, 200 varieties of herbs and scented geraniums, and more. They have a retail store and are open year-round. Scott brings his unique perspective of how horticulture and the nursery industry can improve people's quality of life, provide important education resources to growers, and encourage a deeper connection with our surrounding environment. Hannah Semler is the co-founder and CEO of FarmDrop. Born in Blue Hill, she grew up in Barcelona, Spain, summering in Maine every year. She has a diverse background ranging from working with subsistence farmers in Mexico and Guatemala to earning a Master's of Science in International Food, Business, and Consumer Studies at the University of Kassel in Germany. In 2013, she moved back to Maine to launch Healthy Acadia's Down East Gleaning Initiative, expanding the model to more communities and eventually forming the Maine Gleaning Network. In 2018, she started her consulting business, Whole Crops, working at the intersection of food waste prevention, produce rescue, and hunger relief. She has been a Fink Family Foundation Fellow supporting produce rescue efforts nationwide and has done consulting work focused on technology solutions addressing the problems of food waste, hunger, and disconnected food systems. As CEO and co-founder of FarmDrop US since 2018, she brings her firsthand experience at the community food system level to strengthen the resilience of small-scale farms and food producers with simple cooperative e-commerce systems. FarmDrop offers a community-supported online farmers market tool to build thriving local food systems from the ground up. Together with her co-founder, Kellen Wellborn, Hannah brings a passionate determination for FarmDrop to contribute to rural economic development nationwide with a Maine-made social entrepreneurship. Kelby Young, our final panelist, is the co-owner of Olde Haven Farm in Chelsea with his wife, Pamela. The Youngs followed a non-traditional path to farming, having left behind urban life in Denver. The farm specializes in forest-raised pork, lamb, and certified organic produce. They practice intensive rotational grazing, and their animals are hormone and antibiotic-free. The majority of their meat are butchered on farm, and the farm also offers a wide selection of canned and prepared foods. Kelby also finds the time to manage the Augusta Farmers Market in Mill Park and is also a part of the Portland Winter Market and the United Farmers Market of Maine indoor market in Belfast. Kelby brings a unique perspective to the panel, given his on-farm production experience, as well as his operational expertise with farmers markets and the vital role they play as community hubs, trusted sources of locally grown food, and a viable market channel for farmers. So, without further ado, let's begin this panel. Very quickly, I just want folks watching to know that there will be 2 rounds of questions for each panelist, 5 minutes each. First, focusing on their direct impacts of COVID-19, and then later, their views on how the impacts of COVID can be harnessed so as to sustain the ongoing consumer support for locally produced goods. After that, there will be about 20 minutes left over for Q&A. So I encourage you to be entering your questions and comments in the chat box, and we will be monitoring those as we go along. So Amber, let me start with you. Can you please briefly describe how Maine Grains was impacted by COVID-19 and highlight examples of any innovation or adaptation you experienced that you think may be applicable to other ag businesses in the state?
Absolutely. Thanks, Nancy, for having me today. And it's been a crazy year for everybody, and for the grain business especially. One of the things after toilet paper that ran out on the grocery store shelves, as you may have experienced, was flour. And so we were fortunate to have been a business that already had an online platform for selling our products, but that really exploded in the months of March, April, and May. We were deemed an essential business, so we stayed open through the duration of the pandemic and continue to operate 2 shifts a day. We did make some adaptations. We felt it was safer to spread our employees out, so we stretched out into 2 full shifts a day to give employees room. And we took our twice daily all staff meetings outside. And we continue to meet twice a day outside to discuss any business of the day, and, as well as some sanitation routines that are shared by our entire staff twice a day to sanitize the facility. So it's been pretty intense. I would say the biggest impact to our business really was the online platform, which prior to the pandemic experienced a trickling of orders throughout the week, a dozen or 2 dozen a week. And in the months of March, April, and May, I think we peaked at 180 orders a day. And we're about 3,000 orders deep on the online platform. So we really rallied to make sure that we could fulfill customer demand during that period, and learned a lot. We learned that it was really important to communicate with your customers what the capacity constraints were in the mill and when they could expect to see their order, even if it was a 3-week lead. We found by and large, customers were very understanding, gracious, and thankful that businesses like ours are open and coming to work every day in order to keep people fed. We also learned a lot about customer service. You know, we've got a customer service program at the mill, but boy, there's nothing like the stress of 3,000 customers waiting for an order to stress your customer service skills. So we had regular team meetings about how to answer questions, what our new parameters were for the timing of getting back to customers, what to do if we made a mistake, how to act quickly and make sure that customers were served well. All the while, online sales are a great opportunity to put your product in front of people for the first time. You want to make a good impression. You also want to make sure that you have a way to get back in touch with those people in the future. So we added some plugins to our website for being able to keep regular contact with some of these new customers and offer them some future discounts for their patience during the long wait of the spring. So that has served us well, and we're just seeing our new customer numbers climb as we settle out from that spring rush online. We also threw up bulk bags on our online platform. Normally we sell a retail bag, but customers really wanted to stock their pantries through this period. So we made that possible by altering our bag sizes. And lastly, for now, I'll just add that part of what we're learning in the online sales fulfillment is just, it's a very different kind of business from a numbers and cost of goods standpoint. So as things settle out and we come to understand the expense of handling a package more often than a bulk bag, and we come to understand the amount of packaging that's necessary to make sure we reduce breakage, those will all impact our business going forward in terms of lessons learned through the pandemic. So I'll pause there for now, but it's been a wild ride, and we certainly thank all those customers out there that have supported local food businesses through this time. And I look forward to hearing from some of the other presenters and telling you more in the next question.
Thank you, Amber. Scott, I'm going to turn to you now. As the owner of the largest greenhouse in the state, can you explain how your nursery business was and continues to be impacted by COVID, and what changes have you made that are of value to share?
Well, I thought in the beginning that this was going to be a short-term process. Surely it would all be, our spring season got really wound up around early May, but it wouldn't take us very long to realize that that was not going to be the case. And our thoughts went from optimistic feeling that this is all going to go away to the realization that we may not even be open for our busiest season of the year, that being spring. And our business would not be able to survive the loss of a spring season. To get to that point, that we were stressing out quite seriously about that. And pretty soon everyone was really freaking out, our staff, our customers, news media, everyone was really getting up pretty scared about everything in early April. So we decided to close down for about 4 weeks. We tried our hand at curbside, but we soon realized that was not going to work well for us. We just have too many products, too many variables, and the amount of energy that would go into filling an order was probably 4 to 5 times what the normal process would be. So we were realizing quickly not going to be our solution. All the while in the south part of the United States, we were getting to observe how our other garden centers in that area were dealing with this, and they were actually finding business was stronger than normal, and so we were somewhat hoping that that was going to be the case for us, and realization that curbside was not going to work for us. We did decide to reopen in late April. Now by that time, our staff, all having been away from the public for 4 weeks and watching this thing grow in the news media, they were quite nervous and anxious about this happening. But we did spend a lot of time with trainings and discussions, staff meetings, encouraging people to realize that we can do this and we need to do this. So they all rallied, did a tremendous job. Opening day, it was a big deal. In the meantime, of being closed, we had to strategize how are we going to deal with the lines. On a busy day in May weekend, we could have 1,800 customers come through, and we knew that there was no way we'd fit that number of people in our doors, especially with that kind of with the limitations that we had of allowing only so many people in the store at one time. So we rearranged our interior of our store to make larger spaces for people to spread out. Also finding ways to check people out with instead of 5 registers down to 3. And also in our entrance, we had to figure out how do we get a line of people to be able to stand in a somewhat orderly manner. We had lines at times up to 300 feet long. So that was quite a juggle, just handling that. I will say customers were very helpful through all this. They were supportive, very thankful that we were open, and very complimentary about the way we were arranging things. So we had 2 new positions at Longfellow's, a person who cleaned carts all day, and then a customer who stood and counted customers all day. Changing things around, as you saw in many, many stores, glass, signage, encouraging people to wear face masks and do social distancing. We struggled to find cleaning supplies, Clorox being one of them. And we learned right off early that the smell of Clorox was our friend, because there's nothing that gave the feeling of clean odor or almost pleasant smell of Clorox getting through this. We also did videos to our in the changes in shopping at Longfellow's. We encourage people to shop on weekdays. Bring a list so you can be efficient in your shopping. Limit your number of people in your party. Very often you'd have families of 5, 6 people coming in and spending many hours. And we had to discourage that and encourage more of a 1 person at a time visit. And instead of instead of spending a lot of time shopping, come in, get what you need, and move on so somebody else could have a chance. We closed down our gift department so that we would keep people from doing that kind of lingering, look around, this is nice, what do you think, sort of shopping, and more of a expedited, essential shopping of really getting plants and gardening supplies. We canceled all our customer workshops and classes, and we also did not hold any special events, once again, just to get people in and get people out. So production was a challenge. We grow most of what we raise, and we have a staff of almost 90 people at the peak. And many of those people are growing crops and working on assembly or planting lines. And that was a real challenge, trying to make shortage of labor was also a problem. We had quite a few people who ended up because of their age, or they felt compromised in some way that they needed to step out. So I think that was all the schools that were closed, and there were quite a few college and high school students that came in and gave us a tremendous amount of, they were great workers. We even dropped.
I'm just going to interrupt you real quick, Scott. If you could wrap that up as we transition to the next panelist. Thanks.
All right. So the dropping of new TV and newspaper was different for us, just to not encourage too many people. So we really were one of the very fortunate ones in having an outstanding year, which continued right through and is even continuing now. So thank you.
Thank you, Scott. That's terrific. I never thought the smell of Clorox would be so appealing. Let me switch now to Hannah. Hannah, FarmDrop experienced remarkable growth this past year, as I understand it. Can you explain how COVID fueled that growth, and what were some of those adjustments you had to make to sustain that? And what can people learn from that experience?
Sure. So in April of 2020, at the end of April, we looked at our financials and saw that our sales in the month of April surpassed the sales for the entire year of 2019. Now, two things were true. One, we had only 3 online markets available in Maine in 2019. And we, in February of 2020, still only had 3 market hubs. And so in the month of April, we expanded to 7. And those market hubs experienced tremendous growth, as everybody has explained on the panel. But FarmDrop was the solution that was ready in these communities to basically become the lifeboat that everybody wanted to jump on when other markets, wholesale markets, were no longer available to our producers. So FarmDrop is an online farmers market model where customers order weekly, producers put products up onto their store page on the online farmers market, and site managers, market hub managers receive a payment per order processed. And one of the things that we did not know was the incredible work that the market hub managers did when we went from 40 orders a week to 180 orders a week in some of our communities. And so what we were sort of experiencing, this sort of online trickle of, customers and producers dabbling in digital online marketing and sales channels exploded, and FarmDrop was, in the communities where we were established, the go-to solution for producers to quickly pop up a store and for customers to quickly create an account and start ordering. So the true innovation was back in 2011 when farmers and the Blue Hill Wine Shop in Blue Hill came together to create this model. But it was really our market hub managers in the communities experiencing this growth that had to scramble and innovate. It was the producers that decided to turn to a digital marketing solution, an e-commerce solution like FarmDrop, to expand their direct-to-consumer sales. FarmDrop has always thought that every community should have an online tool because it's a way to create local food systems resilience. It's another channel for different kinds of customers, or in the face of crisis, for a new way of continuing to make sure we can get local food to local people. And when a direct-to-consumer business, like a farmer selling through a farmer's market, wants to scale their business regardless of a crisis, it is very difficult to add more than 4 or 5 farmers markets to your weekly business model. So to add an online system that automates a lot of the manual processes that become a bottleneck otherwise for growth and for expansion is a solution that should be a staple. It should be a part of the landscape in every community. There should be an option for online. I believe it's the way to build for resilient food systems in the future. So our market hub managers, Blue Hill, MDI, Unity, Lisbon, Cape Elizabeth, Gray Maine, Holton, were the incredible innovators that were needing to, now we were already pre-order paid system, but there needed to be safety protocols at pickup. There needed to be a new system for order fulfillment that could process not the 30 or 50 orders a week, but the hundreds of orders a week that were coming in. And they did that. And what they proved to us is that we were able to reach a new limit of what we thought each market could process in terms of orders. So now we know from a business perspective that it is not unreasonable to expect a certain amount of orders per week, and that if we continue to support customers in choosing an online model where they, quite frankly, can get products that aren't available at their local supermarket, we can continue to expand FarmDrop as a solution for increased diversity and increased resilience in how farmers get their product to customers. So one of the things that I will say is that the multi-market model that we are now developing is a direct response to farmers in a community like Blue Hill needing to expand beyond the Blue Hill farm drop to the MDI farm drop, or producers in Unity needing to sell not only in Unity but in Rockport, which is where we're expanding shortly. So what we're doing with the FarmDrop technology is that we are creating now a unified platform that's a multi-market model where with a click of a button, you can, as a producer, show your inventory to multiple FarmDrop community online farmers markets around Maine or beyond. And so we want to make it easy for those direct-to-consumer business models to which all producers had to shift during COVID, but many producers have been, developing their business model based on direct-to-consumer sales to help those producers expand with a smart system that can help them manage their business in a more automated way, in a more efficient way. And so we're really grateful that we were ready for this crisis, and our only regret was that we weren't able to expand more quickly to serve more communities, but we're on our way. So thank you.
Thank you, Hannah. That's fascinating. Definitely we'll have some follow-up questions for you, I'm sure, in the next half. Kelby, I'm turning to you now. You are both a producer and an experienced farmers market manager. Can you briefly explain both the on-farm and market-related impacts and changes that were made within each sphere?
Yeah, I'll start off with the on-farm impacts for us. We kind of have the same story that everybody else did. You saw this thing coming down the pipeline. We watched day by day as the shutdowns got more real, and people were afraid. And as a farm, we saw the vulnerabilities ahead of us with the national food system. Meat especially. Our primary focus is our pork program, and we had been scaling up for some restaurant contracts that kind of got the rug pulled out from under them. So we were in a unique position to where we had been ready to start increased production a month after COVID hit. And so we were able to turn that into a retail market pretty quickly. One of the vulnerabilities that we ran into pretty quickly after that, though, was processing. We went from a healthy demand on our pork products to having to stop people from trying to buy us out. We opened our farm store 3.5 months early to allow customers to come in and pick up products. We also worked with other producers to bring their products into the farm store so that we could have more to offer, so people could have somewhat of a one-stop shop. We found out that everybody that came in the door wanted to buy us out of everything we had. We put a stop to that pretty quick. We said, if you buy with your normal habits and reasonable amounts, then we'll continue to have for everybody that wants to come by. And if you don't, then you ruin it for a lot of people. So we really tried to avoid the big sale of all of our inventory. That way we could keep things going. Other local processors were allowed to retail a lot of their own stuff, or some of them had retail markets originally, and so that put strains on being able to get animals processed. So we ended up starting to cut a lot of our own meat on farm. We'd already put in the infrastructure to do it. It was in the pipeline for us. We just accelerated it by a couple of years. And that gave us a lot more control over what we had and when we had it, as opposed to being at the mercy of open butchering dates. And I will say that we as a farm schedule all of our processing dates at least a year in advance. We found that that's the only way to do it and guarantee that you're going to have what you need. So this last year was no different. But we have found that, even moving into 2022, a lot of the local processors are starting to get booked. And that just reiterates the need for being able to do what we do on farm and cut up our own carcasses. One of the other things that we did in addition to opening the farm store was we started doing online deliveries. So I figured out how to do Google Forms and figured out how to do online marketing. And then we switched to a different platform shortly thereafter. But we went from never doing deliveries to I think we topped out at around 65 deliveries in a week. So thankfully we had a couple of teenage sons that weren't in school and decided they didn't decide, they got to help out. So that allowed us to keep up with the other things that we were doing. We also packed our propagation house full of seedlings and offered seedling orders for customers because we didn't know what the world was going to look like come May. Just like Scott, we have a season that is very important to us, and that's that summer season. And we knew that it was going to benefit us to try to capture sales wherever we could. And then, so like I said, seedlings were one of those things that we went after, and it was successful. People wanted to trust where they were getting their food and their everything from. Being able to tell a customer, here are the hands that touch the food, and the only hands, and I'm healthy. People liked that. We got a much more intimate knowledge of our customer base. For a while there, we might have been the only people that they saw in person during the lockdown. So we were it kind of felt like a lifeline to folks from time to time. And it's, I think it's built customer loyalty to the farm and to small farms in general, because when folks needed food, we were still here. We were still open. And that, it's a good segue into the farmers markets. Typically a winter farmers market would be indoors. In Augusta, we had a small location right next to the Lithgow Library. And as a market group, we decided pretty quickly that we just weren't going to be able to continue in that location. So we've fostered a good relationship with the city of Augusta over years and years and years. And I'm thankful that they support us in what we do. And we said, guys, we need to go back outside. Can we make sure the parking lot's clear? And get us some cones and other stuff. And city was great. And, being open and having stuff consistently was really, I think, what defined the farmers market. There were always concerns about interaction with customers, and we needed to let each farm make those own decisions. But overall, I think it was a very successful farmers market year.
Thank you, Kelby. That was terrific. And it is, in fact, a segue what we were talking about in terms of increased loyalty and knowledge, and that connection between local agriculture and producers and the consumers that I think is going to help fuel, I believe, hopefully, a lasting connection beyond COVID. So if we can switch to the next round of questions, we'll start back up with Amber. I'll just kick off by asking that Maine Grains and your leadership have helped reinvigorate grain production in Maine and has benefited your local community and other food-related businesses all before COVID. Given this extraordinary moment that we are all in, with such attention being paid to supporting local food producers, how do you feel we can leverage this demand in a post-pandemic world?
Thanks for the question. I think that there's a lot of opportunity and silver lining in what we've learned through the pandemic. The first just being that our local food businesses are essential. And they were deemed essential from the get-go because we can feed our communities. And so I think that there is entrepreneurship happening in the food sector right now because we know that we need food in our communities. But I also think there's going to be investment opportunities, and investors are also seeing local food businesses as essential. So I think that's a good thing. As our online deluge settled out after the spring, we watched our numbers pretty carefully in terms of the different segments we served. Restaurants have clearly suffered, but our sales to distributors, bakeries are up. And I think that it has been clear to us in the grain businesses that village bakeries are critical in communities, and people are not going to live without their bread. They're going to find ways to get it. And so it really speaks to the innovation and pivoting and adaptation that happened at the bakery level in communities, and that customers continue to support those bakeries. So I think that's a good thing. For our business, it also meant that mainstream grocers really started paying attention to where to get local flour, and we are in some mainstream grocery stores, but we do a lot to get that product there ourselves and stock the shelves ourselves. And we had not been picked up to distribution for any local mainstream grocery stores yet. And so those conversations began in this process because we can help with the resilience of stocking shelves at the local level. So that's been a silver lining. The personal service that has come from local food businesses in Maine during this time of the pandemic has been, I think, a reassuring, calming, and pleasant experience for a lot of customers who aren't necessarily used to talking with somebody in the business that they're buying from, or getting reassurance, or having a customer service contact directly from the owner or from the customer service representative. So we know that we had those experiences through the pandemic where people were just so appreciative for personal service. And, you know, so that's been a great experience coming out of the pandemic that I think will serve us well going forward. And I would say just, you know, lastly, the last point I'll make is our partners at the Kneading Conference and the Maine Grain Alliance obviously had to pivot and cancel the in-person gathering this year. We're already looking ahead to how do we keep teaching people to make bread and gather around the themes of sharing and expanding local grain production. And I think we're all more comfortable with virtual tools now. So I think we're not going backwards when it comes to connecting with each other globally around the use of virtual tools. This year's Kneading Conference this summer will be a hybrid approach of small group gatherings where it's safe to do so, and virtual connecting globally. Actually, we feared the absence of the in-person conference this year, and what we found is that turning to virtual education and virtual connecting has expanded our audience, has allowed us to reach farther than we were able to reach by having everyone come to Skowhegan. So I think lots of things to look forward to and keep learning as we go forward.
Thank you, Amber. That's very true about the fluency we all now have with online communications. As much as we might really miss those interpersonal connections of being together, life does continue. It does go on, and sometimes in a better facilitated and less environmentally impactful way. Scott, I'm going to turn to you now. You and your wife have successfully managed and grown Longfellow's greenhouses for several decades, and as you mentioned earlier, have up to 90 employees at peak season. This year introduced more people, or 2020 introduced more people to backyard gardening than perhaps ever before. How can this interest, this local interest, be sustained when COVID is hopefully in the rearview mirror?
Well, I would say, fortunately, there was a substantial uptick in plant interest even before COVID hit us. So with COVID really changing people's lives, the people working at home and staying home, that just really to be more interested. And then the other is increase that. There's a little bit of an interesting parallel actually with what's going on now with the millennials and but young people really before COVID were really finding a huge interest in plants. And the baby boomers, and back in the 70s, there was a big environmental awareness, Earth Day, taking care of our planet, developed into, I think, somewhat of a, started with houseplant craze, perhaps. I know all us college students are crazy about filling our dorm rooms with houseplants. And that grew into more of a gardening and landscape craze, and gardening was the #1 hobby for many, many years in America. And I think that really what changed all that was competition in people's lifestyles with the development of malls. Shopping became a pastime of America. And of course, the huge interest in technology was amazingly time consuming for people. So with the millennials, I think they've grown up with technology. It's just a part of their lives. They love it. They eat and breathe it, but they also are looking for something else, and that is plants. My daughter, who's 24, is immensely interested in house plants, and that's changed immensely. So I feel as though there's a wonderful opportunity here, and the COVID situation has actually increased their awareness and their ability and time spent on learning about the wonders of plants, the fascination of plants. I got 2 other children very interested in plant growth and doing gardening of their own. So it's become it's also a cool thing, multi-generational. So I feel as though the COVID virus has created a nice opportunity for people to see what the wonders of plants can bring us. And I do feel as though if they can be successful, that's going to really be a shot in the arm for them. And this last summer, I consider been a great growing year for the beginning gardener. Back in right after the Great Recession, everyone was going to save their lives by growing their own food, and 09 was the worst summer on record, I believe, for rainy weather, diseases, and a lot of issues. And so that was a very discouraging year, and a lot of people gave up. So 2010 was a much poorer spring season. So this past summer was great. People, ourselves and others in our industry, trying to find knowledgeable staff to educate our customers. We're trying to do more education through our social media. And I think there's so much more knowledge now in the internet at people's fingertips that I do feel there's a good chance that people can be successful, want to continue this. And I think as long as with a little bit of luck and somewhat decent growing weather, people will stick with them. I don't know if for sure it's going to last to the degree we're seeing right now, because once the restrictions ease up and people start traveling and doing other things, going out to eat evenings and spending lives more like they used to, that is going to be using up some of their free time. But I'm quite optimistic there's a great future in our industry and people growing plants.
Thank you, Scott. I appreciate that. Hannah, back to you. Do you believe that cooperative e-commerce systems for farmers and food producers are here to stay due to COVID or otherwise? And how will they compete in a post-COVID landscape?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think everybody has talked about their experiences of having to turn to digital tools for their businesses. But when you think about customers and what we experienced, which was the community food systems flocking to FarmDrop, customers turning to this online farmers market tool to stay safe and to support local, there was more happening than just the idea of not wanting to go to the supermarket. The kinds of stories that were being shared nationally about the fragility of our supply chains, the sheer waste of product because of the disconnection that COVID created for those to get their product to market. There were new conversations around the dinner table about hunger. We saw incredible amounts of numbers of people turning out to get their foods at local food pantries and at food banks. And so we're not the same as a culture, as a consumer, as a customer. We understand food security, both from the hunger relief perspective and needing to provide enough food for all community members on a daily basis, and the idea of food security from the perspective of providing and supporting for the viability of our local farms to make sure that we have enough food to go around in our communities, in our regions, and to not create an over-dependency on national and international supply chains. I believe in coexisting food systems. We need all of the different food systems to be improving their relationship to the land and to people. And I think that the most important thing that we found was that customers do not know the farms that are in their own communities. Customers did not and still do not know the kinds of products that are being grown next door to them, up that driveway that they've never ventured up. What digital solutions can do is create transparency of information. You go to farmdrop.us, you click on Blue Hill, and you have a list right there of all the producers offering their products. You can see the kinds of cheeses and meats and vegetables and baked goods and prepared foods that are available right in your community. And it's a new way of communicating to customers about what's available to them locally. I do think that those solutions are here to stay. FarmDrop has demand for more online farmers markets, more FarmDrop to be deployed in the next few months. So we're hopeful that we're going to be able to serve our communities with FarmDrop long term. And one thing that I will say is that we also need to make sure that the online technologies that allow for low-income community members to access freshly made local foods is hugely important. And customers that are using SNAP to access their basic groceries on a weekly basis should have the same opportunities as anybody else to order online. And we need to make those technologies available not only to the Walmarts and Amazons, but also to the FarmDrops and the community online farmers markets that are operating to support food security on both levels, from the perspective of supporting community members who need support, supporting the nonprofits that need unrestricted funding to support their programs, and supporting those producers to grow to new markets beyond their local farmers markets, so that we can expand their ability to reach other customers with their products. One thing I'll say is that through digital communication and information sharing, we can create the transparency needed for customers to understand the benefits of local. Why is it better for the environment? What other stories are also good for the environment that aren't local? Why do we need products from away in the winter months to sustain our businesses and the jobs in Maine and the local food economies? And so I think that as an educational tool, digital tools are very powerful. The last thing that I'll say is that in order for our producers to expand beyond their immediate customer base, it is very difficult to do that. You can't just drive to Unity from Blue Hill and set up a stand on the side of the road and start selling to Unity customers. But you can click a button on FarmDrop and start selling through Unity FarmDrop. So I think that there's a possibility for strengthening local food systems through digital tools that just doesn't exist in the physical world if we're to only continue to do things the way that we've been doing them. Another aspect of the sort of digital framework is the sharing of information between producers, that peer-to-peer learning, but also the combined force that producers can become when sharing in distribution, logistics, and coming together to bring their products from Blue Hill to Unity together, taking turns to manage the obstacles that distance to market poses to our producers in a state like Maine. And so we believe that we're gonna continue to drive FarmDrop's technology systems forward based on what our producers are needing. And we're going to be able to reach those customers that came on board through COVID, and also those that stayed on, which we've seen many of them start to do more of a combination shopping, whereas before they were only maybe going to the supermarket. Now they're all on FarmDrop. So we believe in that sort of coexisting food system and the need for digital supply chains to support our producers in Maine.
Thank you, Hannah. Kelby, how will you as a farmer and also as a market manager work to continue the interest and support for locally produced food? Do you believe it can be sustained, and how? And what do we need to do as a community, as a state, as a region to help support that?
It's a double-edged sword. We're back in a situation where you can go to the grocery store and get everything now, and people feel safer. So I think there is some staying power, especially with fresh produce. Consumers were introduced maybe unwillingly to the seasonality of produce in Maine. When they wanted to go get tomatoes last March, may not have had tomatoes. So people understood how to eat what was available. With meat, that is always going to be a toss-up, because raising, processing, and marketing meat in Maine is never going to be as inexpensive as it is to go get something from Walmart, per se, that's been processed in the Midwest and shipped here. We will never be able to compete in price. And so that always has to be a conscious choice from the consumer. And I do think that, again, like the seasonality of foods, consumers were introduced last year to the real cost of goods. How much does it cost to raise an animal, and why do you have to charge $7 or $9 or $10 a pound for this product when I can just go to the store and get it for $1.50 a pound or $2 a pound? And understanding how fragile that system is, I think benefits us. Markets, we had the opportunity last year to have exposure to new customers that we may not have otherwise reached. And so, last year, and I think this year to an extent, gives us a chance to earn people's trust. I feel like communities in Maine are very much word of mouth, and your reputation matters. So if you are consistent, if you're trustworthy, if you're selling what you say you're selling, people are going to recognize that. And I think the loyalty is a reward that our customers give us. And so, that's a philosophy that we strive to in the farm, and also the farmers markets, is, working really hard to earn the loyalty of our customers. So those are kind of some of the takeaways that I think I've had from the last year. And I apologize. We've also been exposed to more digital marketing, like Hannah's been talking about. A lot of us that pivoted early now understand the pre-order process, and I wouldn't say we've perfected it, but we've made it a part of our repertoire as a business. And having that in our arsenal allows us to offer something to people that maybe don't want to come to the farmers market and talk to all the farmers. They just want to come, pick up, and leave, or even to our farm store, where time is precious to them. So we still continue our online pre-orders. We're still doing deliveries. Again, people are introduced to our products, and a lot of our products are very unique, not something you're going to find anywhere else. And so we're still a consistent source to get that. So, overall, like I said earlier, I think it was a very successful year. We've learned a lot, and hopefully we can continue to pivot and grow from here.
Thank you so much, Kelby. You're spot on with respect to the inherent problem that we all face as producers in the state, with folks fundamentally not understanding the true value of food production, and what it ultimately costs to raise a quality product. And I think you're right. The curtain may well have been pulled back in 2020 and 2021 about why it costs a little bit more here in the state, but the quality that goes with it and the stories behind it and the people behind it. So I do believe you're right that does have lasting value and impact, and hopefully there's no going back. At this point in time, we have about 20 minutes left for question and answers from the viewing public. There have been lots of directions posted on this panel about how to submit questions, but I will follow up actually on the pre-order question, and maybe might direct it to Hannah or Amber or Scott as well, all of you. Is there an opportunity now? Do you feel comfortable now that there's enough demand that you can start actually planning or working with your suppliers to predict what the demand might be going forward so that you can meet the online demand for your products or the products that you're sourcing from others? Are we there yet? Are we moving in that direction? Hannah, why don't I start with you if that question makes sense as it's been posed?
Well, it certainly makes sense in terms of pre-orders. I think have always been at the core of how FarmDrop works. So customers have to be willing to wait a few days in order to receive their products. And what that does for the producers is that they're basically selling online. The basic online model is that you're selling online and the orders are coming in. And for FarmDrop producers, they go in on a Wednesday and print out their bulk weekly order report, do the harvest or collect the products and drive them down to their central location. So they are only bringing to market essentially what they've already sold. It's a form of sort of weekly community supported agriculture. It's like a CSA model, but with choice. And it's not being paid at the beginning of the season, but it's being paid at the beginning of the week. And it's addressing the issue of what we see as sometimes less efficient models of potentially putting out all this beautiful product on a farm stand and having it be a rainy day or something happens and no one shows up, and then having to sort of manage that product. It's not just the loss of the product itself potentially, but also just the loss of time and the loss of opportunity. So I think that there's something to be said for customers' ability to, in the face of a crisis, say, okay, now I'm willing to wait 3 days for my product because it's safer, it's better, it's local. And yes, they're going to go back and they're going to always need to go to the supermarket for certain products that are essential to them. But we can start to think about ways in which they might sacrifice that convenience to the benefit of not only our local food economies, but the sustainability of our land stewardship, which our farmers are the biggest advocates for, and for the trust that is built into having a direct relationship with your producers and knowing where your product is coming from. Really, there isn't really a need for transparency in digital tools when you're buying product from your neighbors because you know them. And that is a huge thing that I think we need to build into our digital tools, is that ability for customers to get to know their farmers, even if they're buying online. So that goes into the next question maybe, but I'll pass it on to the actual producers on the panel who can respond to your question.
Yeah, I'll just, Scott or Kelby, you sort of spoke to the pre-order, but Scott, do you have any comments on that or reflections?
We have debated the possibilities of that, but have really pretty much felt that it would not be cost effective for us to handle the sheer volume in such a short period of time of trying to place, receive orders, pick the product, and have it available. We got, as I said, a taste of it with the curbside experience, and there's just so many different SKUs that we have, as well as just the sheer numbers. We've decided to avoid that. We have felt if we do have a shutdown in the future, we're preparing to be able to provide some of the very basics. So we would have a limited offering online that we could easily meet those needs. But when you've got 50 different varieties of colors of one petunia, you have to be sure that you are not making a bad situation even worse. So right now we're trying to avoid it, but realize it may be a reality.
And Amber, what are your thoughts on this?
Just quick, the digital tools are there now that interface with our websites and our online shops to create standing orders. And so if someone falls in love with our oats and wants a delivery once a month, those tools are there. And that's something we certainly discovered and began to set up through this pandemic.
Very quickly, we just got a quick question in our comments about broadband access, which we know is the Achilles heel for Maine in many ways, and for our producers who want to do retail online sales. Hannah, are there any insights that you have about the dearth of broadband? I mean, you are in a lot of different communities. Has this been a challenge, and how have you been surmounting it?
If it has been a challenge, we've not directly heard of that. We have more of a challenge, for example, with producers that may not have a cell phone and therefore can't get their application to the credit card processing company, because no credit card processing company online will open an account for you if you don't have a cell phone where they can text message you the 2 verification code system. And so we've had to sometimes, offer our cell phone number to our producers so that they can get through the creating an account on FarmDrop. But so we certainly have the technical hurdles that I think producers experience when trying to sort of go onto a digital tool. But we've been around since 2011 and operating with the existing bandwidth in the communities where we operate, we have not had issues. I know that if we were to go into different markets and lead with the ability to provide online farmers market in communities where, for example, the majority of our customers might be customers that are experiencing food insecurity and need to use their SNAP benefits to order. I think that those are the areas that will very much need the broadband access to be able to, it's another barrier, yet another barrier to accessing local foods digitally as well as other things online. So we're aware of it, and we're willing to work with groups that are advocating for that work to move forward.
Kelby, have you seen the issue of broadband, whether at your own farm and or within your farmers market experience? How are your fellow farmers dealing with this?
Most of us are in and around the Augusta area, so broadband access isn't really the issue. The education around which platforms to use and how to use them correctly, I think really became more prevalent as an issue than broadband. I know that there are communities where it is really difficult to get service. But even with an online ordering system, if you can set up a time to go somewhere where you have service, that's always an option. But for us, switching from an emailed PDF form to Google Forms to now we use Zoho and are able to embed that in our website. And then from not having a managed customer database to having a customer database of 300-400 people, and how to use tools like MailChimp to keep in contact with everyone. And then from there, how do you manage the orders? So I think adding a completely new angle to your business and it's almost a new enterprise. And figuring out how to do that efficiently and cost effectively was the key. And I think if farms are going to move towards that, those are really some of the hurdles that you're going to have to overcome.
Kelby, I'm just going to keep you on the spot here for a moment. We got a question directed to you that reads, are there USDA meat processing policy changes you'd like to see help businesses like yours respond to cross-border demand or on-farm processing? This is about responding to consumer demand for small producer meat and poultry.
So yes and no. We aren't close enough to the border to where cross-border demand is an issue. We haven't tried to market in the rest of New England. So yeah, I would say that the USDA could relax a few things, but even within the state, and I don't, I appreciate everything that the state did to relax what they did this year. But one of the ways that we're hamstrung is because we produce a lot of our things on farm. We cannot sell to other retailers. So if I have meats that are processed through a state inspected service, then I can sell those. But everything that we do on farm, we have to sell direct to consumer, or actually direct to end user. So we can still sell a certain portion to restaurants or schools or institutions, but our direct to consumer demand is what dictates what we're able to do. So if anything, I would like to see maybe some more relaxed or well-defined regulations that would allow small producers that are producing in a certified space to be able to sell to other retailers. Because we've had to cut that out of our business because of what we do.
Appreciate that input. And I will say tomorrow there's going to be a discussion by a member of the department staff about recent learnings of the demand for infrastructure investment to help relieve bottlenecks associated with slaughter and processing, whether it's well, of course, for meat, but in other areas too. So it's a multidimensional problem that you're mentioning, and one that's going to take some creative solutions and some funding for sure. I'm going to ask a broad question that we got in about the impact well, I'll just read it rather than rephrase it. What kind of impact do your new systems and practices have on our climate crisis? Do you think you have helped raise your customers' awareness of how their food decisions affect our environment? Amber, I think I'll start with you on that one.
Sure. We do work to help educate our customers about the impact of their food choices. And as it relates to grains are a plant-based food. We preferentially purchase organic grains. And so a healthy organic farm system that includes grains has farm benefits. Grains help manage perennial weeds in the form of cover cropping, things like rye and buckwheat to improve soil health. But we launched a line of crop rotation dry beans a couple of years ago that really went mad online on our sales through this pandemic. Beans are a great staple to keep as a dry good in your kitchen. But the point that our label says they are crop rotation beans, and that's important if our farmers are growing grains, to be rotating with crops that help balance soil nutrition. Now, recently I had the chance to listen to a talk by Dr. Ellen Mallory up at the University of Maine Cooperative Extension, who has extensive understanding and research on climate issues and carbon sequestration. And so as Mainers, it's important for us to know that the support of our small farm systems here is an important way to mitigate the climate crisis. But if you want to have the biggest impact possible on carbon sequestration, you should go buy trees from Scott. Trees will do the best possible job grabbing carbon from the atmosphere and putting it back into the soil. Farming in Maine has far less of an impact on carbon than the industrial scale of farming elsewhere. So we have that to feel good about in Maine, and we also should feel good about living in a state that is dense with trees.
I can jump in also, if you don't mind, Nancy, talking about how we work with customers specifically to start practicing a weekly consumption habit. So where one thinks that everything is available every day and you can just go to the supermarket and buy, there's less of an intention of planning your meals and planning your weekly consumption. And more of a tendency towards food waste in the home. And we know that food waste is a huge issue and contributor to climate change with methane emissions and landfill. And in areas where we don't have commercial composting available, it's really important to address it at the customer, at the consumer level, in preventing food waste from happening. And we have seen and believe that the weekly order cycle, that behavior leans itself towards planning your meals in a different way. If you're willing to wait 3 days to receive your groceries, you're going to think pretty carefully about what it is that you're going to buy and how you're going to use it. And also the value of the food is, apparent. You're making a decision in a different way where you're not just going around in the supermarket and filling your cart, but you're really looking into the product and, making a decision about the product, the value of that product and how you're going to use it. And also by default of using an online pre-order system, you're contributing to, in our view, producers also not, bringing a bunch of product to market, hoping to sell, and then not always, selling out of every single product. And so we believe in the nutrient density, the product being brought, harvested that morning. There's a lot of waste that happens in just the nutritional quality of product that has traveled very, very many miles to arrive to your table, and it just doesn't last as long in your refrigerator, and you're more likely to throw it away. If you purchase a product, if you order online, if you pick it up even at a farmer's market or a local co-op, but if it's been harvested that morning, it's likely to have 2 weeks of shelf life in your refrigerator if tended to. So all of these things are things that we like to make sure our customers know, that when they're ordering on FarmDrop, they're getting the freshest possible local product available, and it's going to last longer, and they're going to waste less, and overall contribute to a more sustainable food system.
That's terrific. Thank you for that. Yes, being mindful about planning our food is a great way relative to food waste. And I will add what you just mentioned about the nutrition of food. Let's not forget that some of our producers in Maine actually freeze a lot of what they make too. I'm thinking of wild blueberries, for instance. Blink and you miss August and those fresh wild blueberries, but 90% or more of those wild blueberries are frozen, and that is accessible year round too. I think that's something that a lot of consumers forget. They think we live in the north and there's snow usually this time of year. What can I possibly get locally? And yet our agricultural products are available all year round. Kelby, I welcome you to add some thoughts on that, but I also had a question. You said earlier that your sons are helping make 65 deliveries or were a week, and we got a question in here about generally to the group, and anyone can jump in as they want in the few minutes we have remaining, but how are you all thinking about balancing, prioritizing online tools and ordering versus traditional retail partners in the coming year? And I would just frame that for you, Kelby, in terms of 2020 and 21 have been and continue to be remarkable. You've made adjustments, you're doing online fulfillment, you're making these orders, but there's a point where that might just be too much. I mean, when you think about things calming down, how do you believe there might be some recentering of your program?
Yeah, so I will say that we've always tried to have several facets of our business to, from what we produce to how we sell it. That way, if something were to happen, we can still remain fluid. And this year has been no different. That being said, I am probably more tired this winter than I ever have been. It's been a marathon. We were in the middle of building a pretty sizable barn last winter. We finished a week before COVID, and COVID hit, and then the greenhouse fired up and we went into lambing. So we have this ebb and flow to our year, and this is typically our restful time. And we're finding that even this year, maintaining the current levels is stressful. So as a business, we've grown. And one of the things that we've grown is our labor. So by adding jobs to the farm, we aren't necessarily adding profitability, but we are increasing our impact locally by by maintaining those jobs year round where we haven't typically. So it's helping share the load. I've got some more sanity because of that, and I don't feel like I have to do everything myself. So being able to maintain that long term as our farm continues to grow, and that also builds into the viability of our farm. Having people that we trust that we can keep year round, and then where we prioritize that moving forward, and how we look at our retail partners, and for me to remove something from the farm because it's not profitable, we're going to have to look at that. We're going to have to look at the levels of what we're able to maintain. The online deliveries, I think, like I said earlier, for us, we have such a much more intimate relationship with our customers because of that, and I think that's very important. And because of that, I think I'm willing to continue with that longer than maybe I would something else. And it's any direct to consumer model you can have as a farm is a benefit, because that's where you're going to get top dollar for your product. But at the same time, staying fluid, maintaining relationships with the farm drops, or if we were a grain producer with Maine Grains, is only going to increase the safety net that your farm has.
That's incredibly well said. Thank you very much. I'm taking a look at our clock, and I think we have run out of time. So I want to thank all these panelists today for your input. Congratulate you on your accommodations and your pivoting, as I said earlier, and your time today. For those who have been watching, you can check out on the Whova app information about how to follow up with these presenters, contact them with further questions, and please continue to dial in for the rest of this week. We have a lot of great sessions coming up. So thank you, Amber, Scott, Hannah, and Kelby, and thank you all for your time. Much appreciated.
Thank you.